Hey, welcome everybody to the 40 Finance channel. My name's Jeff Beers. I just got done spending a couple hours on the ARK Invest site, just kind of going through their holdings and getting a feel for, what has changed over the past 60, 90 days in terms of their investment focuses. And as I was looking at the different names, I kept thinking like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's very interesting. So I thought I'd do a quick video here and just go through 12 names that I found in different ARK funds that I thought were particularly intriguing, and of course the reasons why. Quick reminder before we jump in, my stock picks and projections, they're just my opinion for your entertainment. Please make sure you do all your research and due diligence before jumping into any stock. However, if you do enjoy stock market research and personal finance videos, then please make sure to subscribe to the 40 Finance channel. Thank you to everybody who has supported the channel so far. All right, so I'm going to call this 12 Intriguing ARK Invest Holdings, was the name that I came up with. And if you're not familiar with ARK Invest, they focus around what they call disruptive innovation, which is basically companies that are setting the precedent for each category that they're in. So you can see very quickly across the top there, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles. I think a lot of people miss this here, but autonomous vehicles is different than electric vehicles. They typically do coincide with one another, but the game isn't electric for ARK. The game is autonomous. So I do like to call that out whenever I'm talking about ARK Invest. Fintech technology, DNA, robotics, 3D printing, you get the point. These are all things that are moving the world in a new direction and at an accelerated pace. All right, taking a look at the top 10 holdings for the ARKF ETF, which is their fintech play. And a couple ones that jumped out to me that have made it into the top 10 is C Limited, Adyen, and PayPal Holdings. PayPal, I put that one in orange because I cover it here on the channel all the time. We're not going to talk about that too much, except I will say I believe that the PayPal addition is new for ARK, and they, of course, are very big fans of Square. And now PayPal has made their announcement about the Bitcoin opportunity that they're going to launch next year. And so for me, as a big PayPal investor, I was happy to see that it got added to ARK. Not only because, whatever they bought here, $36 million worth of PayPal, that's great too. But there's just so many people who follow ARK, and whatever ARK buys, they buy. So it's kind of a win for PayPal. It gives them like that extra sense of credibility for the growth story that they have going on. But the two that really struck me the most was C and Adyen. Adyen has really made some big strides as sort of an e-commerce payments platform. And their biggest thing right now is sort of selling on this omni-channel experience, right? So understanding that people shop on different browsers, they shop on different platforms, apps, in many cases on store as well. So that's been their pitch, and trying to not only unify the experience for the consumer, but perhaps more importantly, unifying the payment system for the merchant. That's been their really big game, right? And I put a couple of the companies that they work with down there: eBay, Spotify, McDonald's, Microsoft, Uber. They are a smaller company, and unfortunately, they are not traded on a United States stock exchange. So I've had a lot of people ask about Adyen and my thoughts on it. I think they're awesome. I wish I could get it from the NASDAQ or NYSE, but it looks like if you want to get in on this one, you are going to have to purchase it as a foreign stock, which isn't the end of the world, but then you start to get into these questions about sustainable volume and liquidity. And then also you will likely pay some sort of fee for a foreign stock to trade that stock, depending on your broker and your platform. Next, I mentioned C Limited, and C is interesting. I really just started looking at them more closely. They are focused on the Southeast Asia market, and what's probably the coolest thing about them is they have these three pillars, right? They have Garena, which is all digital. They call it digital entertainment, but it's basically gaming and e-gaming competitions, things like that. Shopee, which is essentially the Amazon of Southeast Asia. And then C Money, which is going to be like your Square type service, PayPal type service over there as well. So they're definitely in the right areas for massive growth. And you can purchase this one off of the NASDAQ exchange, so it might be something to look at. Website for investors is really cool. And so this one's now on my watch list. I think it's about $160 a share as of, today. So I might wait for a dip. It's hard. It's really hard with a foreign company stock because the rules are different. The accounting principles are different. So you just have to dig in as deep as you can and make sure that the growth story is really, truly there. All right, shifting over to the ARK Q ETF, which is autonomous vehicles, energy storage, robotics, automation. Two things that stuck out, Alphabet and John Deere. Alphabet, I don't think that that's a huge surprise mostly because of Waymo. But I think what sort of surprised me here was just that the holdings had gotten to 4.65%, which is about half of Tesla. I think the big call out that goes often overlooked for Google investors is, there's Waymo and it's off to the side and they're doing stuff with Lyft and it hasn't produced anything yet. But the other catch is there's Google Maps. And Google Maps, obviously has the potential to be a major power driver in autonomous vehicles as time goes on, particularly if Waymo becomes something that's used not just in a handful of Lyft cars, but what if it gets to a much bigger footprint than that? And you got Waymo and Google Maps, and just like Tesla's doing, the Waymo experiment is also bringing in data. So Tesla's ahead there because their driver cars already have navigation that's bringing in data. But don't forget that Google has navigation too, bringing in data because they have those map cars going all across the world to help build Google Maps. So very interesting. But perhaps on a more interesting note is John Deere. John Deere is an ARK Invest, high growth platform. And I don't think that that should be overlooked. I think that that is a very intriguing play at 3.88%. And I went to John Deere's website very specifically because I saw them here. And there's this area called Future of Farming. And I encourage you to check it out just because it's really cool. Go to John Deere, type in Future of Farming, or I don't know how you get there, but this is where I landed. And they basically have these three cores that they're focused on. And what were those? Electrification, automation to autonomy, and AI. And you can see this is obviously an electric tractor, but they are really looking ahead to the future. If you can imagine farming being done from almost like a control tower, where they have drones and these electric autonomous tractors, and they've even added AI into weed chemical sprayers to identify who needs what. Just amazing, amazing stuff. And there's one thing we know about farming is, yes, the little guy has certainly been pushed out, but that's a topic for another day. However, in the grand scheme of things, the need for farming and the production of food goes up every single day as more people inhabit the earth. So it isn't really super surprising when you take a quick look at it, why ARK is intrigued with what Deere is doing. And you got to think with John Deere, like, hey, if you can do this for farming, like that's not the only thing those guys make, right? Start talking about construction and the equipment that goes into that. So very, very interesting. I encourage you to look into it deep. All right, let's take a look at ARKW, which is a fund that I was in for a long time. It's with sort of Web 2, 3, 4.0, or whatever we're on now, but internet first companies. And, it always surprised me why Tesla eventually made it into that fund. It's not like Tesla's underrepresented in ARK Invest's portfolio. So that's one of the reasons I sold out of ARKW. Now, I do have the ARKK, or however you want to say it, because I believe in so much that they do. But once ARKW started getting more into like Tesla and Roku, and less about the kind of companies that you would normally think of with the internet, that's why I left that one. But performance is good, and it's a great one to consider. The ones that really stuck out to me, though, Spotify, Teladoc, and I highlighted Grayscale Bitcoin Trust because I want to let you guys know that that is one that I use to buy Bitcoin, at least now. And it's basically shares of a Bitcoin ETF. It's not the most ideal situation. When PayPal launches their Bitcoin investing platform, I will probably jump in and buy a little bit there just to have it. But going back to the Spotify for a second, if you dig through Spotify, it is a very interesting universe. And now that they're jumping into the podcast game, and they have been in it now for 6 months or so, maybe even longer, they definitely have like this internet capability, right, between music and pod and where those things are going, and that's kind of app universe. And the one reason I really like Spotify outside of Ingenuity is because of their advertising platform. Their advertising platform is literally getting better by the day, and it gives you a lot of opportunities to advertise to people based on music interests, but it will continue to grow into different demographic regions too. And the coolest part, I think, even though I'm not a musician, is musicians are using it to get exposure for their new songs. So the sort of up-and-comers of the world have an ability, and frankly, probably the best dollar for dollar advertising you can do as a young artist would be, to dump yourself into Spotify, pay what you can afford for some promotion, and get exposure to people. So I really like that one. I was surprised to see Spotify holdings were up to 3.5%. And it makes me just believe everything I just told you to like the 10th degree. Teladoc, that one raised my eyebrows mostly because I thought I was in the wrong place. But if you go through Teladoc, you can see that their combination of joining with Livongo is probably going to eventually lead to this patient portal on the internet that has all your genome information. It has all of your disease risk and your patient profile. And then you can go use that in tandem with digital doctor calls and stuff. I mean, just absolute maddening possibilities. It's not something that's going to happen next year or probably not even 2 or 3 years from now. But can you imagine a digital phone call, much looking very similar to this video, where your doctor has all of that genomic information, and then the Livongo AI, which helps doctors sort of predict some things that might be of concern in your body workings. Just really crazy to think about. And, I think Teladoc got a lot of credit because of the pandemic, and people had to use certain applications like that. But I really do think that their purchase of Livongo and the long-term impact, it really strikes home when you see them appear in this ARK sort of web ETF, right? Because you wouldn't really put that angle on it, but it is true. The day is coming when you'll get better, probably healthcare from a couple of applications than you would from just walking into your doctor's office. All right, this is ARKG, which is CRISPR gene editing. All these things, I'm gonna skip ahead. I don't know anything about them, right? I know what they are. I know why, thanks to ARK, I know what they are, and I know why they're important, but I'm not smart enough to understand, how they work or what the business proposition is on them. But the call out here is that you see Teladoc showing up in yet another fund in the top 10 holdings for pretty much all the reasons we already went through, right? So Teladoc is one that I really need to put real firmly on my watch list. To be fair, it's one that I kind of blew over on the pandemic. just because I thought, you know, eventually this is a one-year thing, right? So oversight on my part. But once I started reading about the combination with Livongo and how ARK is viewing what that can be, I'm all of a sudden super excited, so you may see me adding that one soon. All right, this little clip, we're still talking Teladoc for a second. This little clip I took out of Seeking Alpha. Somebody wrote an article about it. With a lot of healthcare disruption knocking at the door, such as cheap genome sequencing, CRISPR, personalized medicines, and much more, data will become more and more important for healthcare. Livongo's AI will add that to Teladoc. So just a quick summary of what I've already tried to describe earlier. All right, and we'll finish here with ARKK. So this is their sort of feature fund, which it's just disruptive technology, right? It doesn't focus on fintech or anything like that. This fund is the one that I switched to. It kind of is just, you know, my thought process, just give me, you know, your best ideas. And let's do it that way instead of owning 57 ETFs. And I think that I was a little surprised, honestly, at the top 10. Like, we knew Tesla, I knew Invite, I knew Square, CRISPR, things like that. To see Roku at 3, though, I like Roku, and the price went down recently, which could be why they added some. But I didn't really see that as the top 3 holding. They're probably not ordered in importance, because you can't just buy a stock when you think it's the most important. You have to wait for the right price action to balance an ETF. But Roku was a surprise to me, so I need to dig back in there and see what their growth prospects are. Teladoc, we've already talked about. Zillow is another one on my list. And Zillow is one that I always struggle to buy at the $100 price mark. I don't know why I just don't buy it and put it away and not look at it. Because that real estate world is ripe for disruption. And not even disruption as much as I would say digitization. And then last but not least, LendingTree. So my point here on LendingTree, the reason I highlighted for this presentation, they've owned LendingTree in their ETFs for 4 or 5 years, I think. I can't remember when ARK first came out, but I've been watching them for a while. And LendingTree is a stock that you do not see many people talk about, but ARK continues to hang on to them year after year. Now we're in the top 10 of their featured fund. So I personally am going to dig more into LendingTree's reports to see, like, do they have something on tap for the future that some of us are missing here? Because I'm way into fintech and I'm way into the digitization of money in general. So LendingTree is one that I'm going to look more closely. All right, guys, those are my 12 call outs from browsing through the ARK site. These are the names that stuck out to me, like, hey, I need to learn more. I need to go investigate more just to make sure that I'm not interested in owning this as a standalone. Because as you know, like, the standalone stocks will perform better if they go up. However, the risk side of the standalone stock is much higher than owning the ETF, right? Because ARK's team will sell before it craters, whereas you might hang on to it. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. For me, I love reading about the ways that these companies are going about things. So that's why I called this out. Hope you enjoyed it. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this type of content. We'll see you on the next video.